Let's talk about the character that is in the MCU twice, kind of. Bobbi Morse, aka Mockingbird. In this series, I, Nando from Nando V Movies, talk about a character from Marvel Comics, one that is just being introduced in Marvel Snap. Now, this video is not exclusively about Marvel Snap. Most of it is going to be me just talking about the character, comic history, powers, personality, all that stuff. Then at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about how that Marvel Snap card factors into this character, whether I think it's a good representation of this character, cards who I think it could synergize interestingly with. This one's going to be a pretty quick end bit. There's not a whole lot to this Snap card, but it's a good card, and she's an interesting character. So originally this character, Barbara, was just a supporting player in Khazar Comics. It was written by Jerry Conway with art by Barry Smith, ink by Bill Everett, and letters by Artie Simic. And in that issue, all she was a person who was looking for Khazar, whose name I don't think we even knew then, would eventually learn is Barbara. This character became a supporting character in the Khazar series. Khazar is like Marvel's Tarzan. He was very popular at the time. He's since kind of gone in and out of being important. He lives in Savage Land with the dinosaurs. The X-Men hang out with him from time to time. But basically, Barbara at the time got stranded in Savage Land with her fiance. They worked together with Khazar and hung out with him and, had an adventure. Not incredibly important. So in Astonishing Tales 12, we learned a little bit more about a character named the Man-Thing, who we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Werewolf by Night. Basically, the flashback we see in this comic is something that was supposed to appear in another comic, but it didn't, and then they used it here. All it is there is a scientist by the name of Bobbi Morse who is working for Project Gladiator, she's a biologist, so say it with me, an attempt at recreating the super soldier serum. When this is the same place where Ted Sallis, another biologist, say it with me, is trying to recreate the super soldier serum, and he turns into Man-Thing. So she's connected to that experiment. She didn't turn him into the Man-Thing, but she's doing her experiments to recreate the super soldier serum there as part of Project Gladiator. And the writers of Astonishing Tales 12 basically said, oh, this intro with this Barbara character, that can be our Barbara. So they wrote the whole thing together that she was going to find Khazar so that he could go and help them deal with a disturbance in the Florida Everglades. So that's why they're there looking for Khazar, and that's why she is related to the Man-Thing incident. Then it's revealed that Barbara, or for now on I'm just gonna call her Bobbi because everybody calls her Bobbi, her fiance, Paul, was actually an AIM double agent, and then they defeat him, and then Bobbi hangs out with Khazar for a little bit. Apparently she was also working for S.H.I.E.L.D. undercover, kind of. It wasn't clear if she was an agent at this time or if she was just kind of keeping tabs on her because she was working alongside S.H.I.E.L.D. with the Project Gladiator thing. So after this, Bobbi and Khazar are kind of a thing. They're together. Then Shauna the She-Devil gets introduced and Bobbi gets pushed away. She is not part of these books anymore. She's got to do her own thing. But by this point, she is Agent 19 of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is her new identity. The same way that Sharon Carter is Agent 13, she is Agent 19. If you're thinking, Agent 19, I remember that from somewhere. Where do I remember that from? We'll get to it. So after Khazar, she goes on a mission as part of S.H.I.E.L.D., but she has to create a superhero identity. So this is, of course, where Mockingbird comes into play. Not really. This is where a different identity of hers comes into play that we will never hear about again for reasons that you'll understand when you hear it. She became the Huntress. So she did a covert mission as the Huntress. Then when Bobbi came back into the picture, they decided to turn her into Mockingbird. Why was this? Well, in the time between when Bobbi Morse Huntress was introduced, DC's Huntress was introduced. So when Bobbi Morse came back, they're like, well, we need to give this character a different identity. Hey, you know what? I was thinking about this other character we were doing called Mockingbird. Why don't we just have our Huntress, Bobbi Morse, be Mockingbird? And then that's where this character came from. So now we have the new canon Bobbi Morse story. It's fully brought together in a Hawkeye series that she's a big part in. We learn Bobbi Morse, biology student, joins S.H.I.E.L.D., works on Project Gladiator, becomes a super spy, becomes Mockingbird, a super spy scientist superhero who works with S.H.I.E.L.D. and also Hawkeye specifically. The two work on this case together in the Hawkeye miniseries and become romantically involved. And they are a couple. And Hawkeye in the comics, I would say differently from in the movies, is not, I wouldn't say like a player necessarily, but he does not have a secret family hiding in the woods. Like, he has the same kind of hookups as characters like Iron Man. Maybe not quite at the level of like Daredevil or Hercules, but like, he's up there. And then Bobbi and Clint get married. She joins the Avengers, and this is when the West Coast Avengers is formed. So this is a second team, kind of a spin-off Avengers team made of characters who were popular, but were not like the main Avengers characters. So Hawkeye and Mockingbird led the team. This is where you had Wonder Man, Tigra, Scarlet Witch, Iron Man eventually, and a couple of other characters would come in and out of this group. But if you are familiar with Clint's story, you will know that these characters are divorced. They are not married now. Well, that's because of this really weird incident where the team went back in time in a series I think it's called Lost in Space and Time, and they went to cowboy times. And Bobbi got lost and she got captured by a character named the Phantom Rider. So this Phantom Rider character is kind of like an evil ghost from the Wild West who's able to possess different members of this bloodline that he's part of, the Slade bloodline, not related to Deathstroke in any significant way at all. I don't think this was like a parody of Deathstroke or anything. Then this character hypnotized, like mind controlled Bobbi, tricked her into thinking she was in love with him. They slept together, which is bad. And then the Phantom Rider falls off a cliff. Bobbi does not help him, so she is somewhat complicit in his death. And she goes back to the future, doesn't tell anybody about it, life goes on. But eventually she does start explaining this to her fellow Avengers, and Hawkeye does not like this. And it's because of the murder thing. He has this really strong rule, apparently, against her killing this guy. She gives him all the information, too. She's not just like, hey, I killed a cowboy in the Wild West. She explains the whole Phantom Rider story, and he still cannot get past this, so they just get divorced. Their relationship is over, so Bobbi and Clint become separated. I don't know if they're officially divorced immediately. It's something that I think takes time over the course of the comics, so that's a development that keeps going. They actually do team up to teach a new group that just started, the Great Lakes Avengers, so they're a big part of that story. And then they come back and things are going well until a demon creates an army of villains called the Lethal Legion, which is made of the souls of Joseph Stalin and Lizzie Borden and a bunch of the other villains of history. They kidnap Mockingbird, take her to hell. Mephisto helps the rest of the West Coast Avengers go down and get her because he's having a power struggle with this other demon. And as they're all leaving at the very last moment, Mockingbird sacrifices herself to save Hawkeye. She dies very sad, no more Mockingbird for a while. Okay, but what we will learn that makes no sense based on all of the rules that this usually follows is that Bobbi was captured at some point by a Skrull, and the Skrull took her place. Now, this happened sometime during the West Coast Avengers years. And in fact, the Skrulls will say the Skrull that was standing in for Bobbi did not know that she was not Bobbi. So everything that she was doing counts, emotionally, but that character that died was not the real one. The real one was in a spaceship, and when we beat the Skrulls, she got to come back down and be part of the Avengers again. So she's back on the team. She's still divorced from Hawkeye, but she joins the new Avengers. And this is when we get some of her more recent stories, and we get this new kind of tormented Mockingbird. Honestly, it reminds me of a lot of the Jessica Drew comic that came out around the same time, the Spider-Woman comic, because she was also a character who was replaced by a Skrull doppelganger. She was replaced by the Skrull Queen, Varanki, but just in general, she had a part of her life stolen from her, a part of her identity stolen from her, and she has to reconcile that over the course of these, next couple of years. And when she comes back, Bobbi takes a bunch of other estranged secret agents and forms a group called the World Counterterrorism Agency, I think? Whatever it is, it's a fancy name that is WCA again. So they're doing West Coast Avengers again. And this is where she brings in Hawkeye, and the two have maybe their most well-known story, which is the Hawkeye and Mockingbird series. And in that series, the Phantom Rider comes back, inhabits the body via magic because the person who is his descendant is holding the pot that holds the soul of the original Phantom Rider. She drops it and is able to just get into her and turn her evil. So this new version of the Phantom Rider teams up with Crossfire, who has also been a pretty consistent villain for Bobbi and Hawkeye, and takes revenge, and they have to work together to defeat him with a different Phantom Rider. It's a very fun story. I think it gives a good sense for what these two are like, why they work well together and why they don't work well together. Then they say this a couple times in the series. They're too similar. They're both kind of loose cannons. They're both kind of screw-ups. They work well together in that they make each other happy, but at the same time, they're not good for each other. Add on the fact that as part of this reunion, Clint decided to find Bobbi's mom because he didn't know who they were. He was like, you never introduced me to your mom. Like, he didn't tell her that because he just thought it, because when he finds her, he's like, hi, you're Bobbi's mom. And she's like, no, Bobbi is dead. And it turns out Bobbi faked her death as part of the S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, which apparently Hawkeye did not know. Gets her mom involved in everything. It's a huge mess. It's not good. Mockingbird has her own very, very small corner of the Marvel Comics universe. It is inhabited by Hawkeye, obviously, and sometimes Spider-Man, because they used to work together a very, very long time ago. Just really hang out with Man-Thing as much as you'd expect. I'm surprised there are not more Mockingbird Man-Thing team-ups. But then just this WCA team, and the only consistent villains, the Phantom Rider and Crossfire. And the Phantom Rider becomes her Joker, her most recurring nemesis. She even sets up an evil cruise to capture her that does not go very well. And outside of being on the ForceWorks team very recently, there's not too much that Mockingbird has done. Now, she did get a super soldier cocktail at some point, gave her the powers of the Infinity Formula mixed with the super soldier serum. So she has your traditional Captain America powers. She can jump and do a backflip, and she's very strong. She also does not age. I guess none of these guys age, so it doesn't really matter. And it is a very unstable version of the super soldier serum, apparently, so she has to deal with the effects of that. But like all versions of the super soldier serum are unstable versions of the super soldier serum. It is funny how many characters are just like, they tried to do Captain America again. I think it's funny how in She-Hulk, she brings up how derivative the steal the Hulk's blood plot line is. She's like, isn't that like when we tried to steal the super soldier serum again and again and again? And it's like, you don't even know, because the original plan to make the Hulk was just so that we could recreate the super soldier serum. So even any plan involving the Hulk is already a Captain America plan. But okay, so that's kind of her vibe. She's a very talented, very smart, young-ish, somewhat unpredictable, super secret agent. She exists on, I would say, if there's a spectrum, where on one end you have Black Widow, who is full like secret agent who might kill you if you do the wrong thing. And then on the other side, you've got Agent 13, who's very much like Captain America's perfect little secret agent. Bobbi's right in the middle, kind of oscillating, but she's always a little bit drawn towards the side of like being unhinged and not doing what she's supposed to. Then on the other side, like because of her connection to Clint and the other Avengers, she does have that moral compass that stops her from, executing everybody. Now this character, Mockingbird, Agent 13, has been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe twice, kind of. It depends, because we usually don't count Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and those shows as canon to the MCU. Obviously, MCU characters show up on them all the time, but because they never show up in the MCU, it doesn't feel like, if it doesn't happen in the movies, it's not pure MCU. Now, there was that one time when the butler who played Jarvis actually did show up in Avengers Endgame, but besides that, we've never had any other characters cross over in that way, as being characters that were introduced on TV and then moving into the MCU. For that reason, she shows up in season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is the Hydra takes over, and like this is in the aftermath of Captain America the Winter Soldier. She's another agent who finds the S.H.I.E.L.D. family, Coulson and friends, and joins that team and becomes like a really solid member of the team. It's played by Adriana Padalecki, who you may recognize from the Orville, or that Wonder Woman pilot that never got off the ground, or that Aquaman show that never got off the ground. And also her character Bobbi was so popular in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that they were going to spit her off into her own show called Marvel's Most Wanted, with her boyfriend on the team, a character named Lance Hunter, I believe was his name. They did leave, and they did a very definitive, like, we're never going to be on the show again, and then nothing happened with the pilot. I would love to see it. This character did feel like a pretty faithful representation of Bobbi, in that super spy, super secret agent, has relationships, has a history on S.H.I.E.L.D., generally competent, smart, all that. In the same way that like Quake eventually became Quake, this character showed up fully formed, like with a history. And I think that was part of why people liked her so much, was because there was a lot of like, oh, is this character gonna end up being important? Is this character, what's their secret gonna be? And at a certain point in the show, we were just like, can we have one character from the comics just show up and be like, hey, I'm the one from the comics? And she was that. Her main weapon is Mockingbird has a set of what are called battle staves, which are, essentially sticks, which she could turn into a big bow staff, and she can use for a lot of things. In the animated series that she's part of, she uses this to like, it's a telescoping pole that she can use to like climb up to a ceiling. I don't think that usually happens in the comics. It's usually like Donatello from Ninja Turtles has the bow staff. You can just kind of snap that in half and use it as 2 sticks. And this made it into the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. version of the MCU. However, it is later revealed, as a spoiler in the Hawkeye show, that one of the things, I guess the thing that Clint was really, really concerned with getting was a watch that was, I think, stolen from them. I can't remember. It ended up being part of this auction, and Clint needed to recover it. No one really understood why, but it turns out that the watch belonged to Clint's wife, and the watch says Agent 13 on it. So at least in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it seems like Linda, I think Barton, Clint's wife, was Mockingbird at some point. Like, at least she was the secret agent version of Mockingbird. She was such a secret agent that, like, if people found out she was a secret agent, that would be very bad for her, even though she lives a secret life with a secret family, and she is married to public hero Hawkeye. So, like, there's people that are always like, I wish I could kill Hawkeye, but, who has the time? But if they found out Agent 19 was there, they'd be like, oh, actually, we gotta go get her because we hate her even more than we hate Hawkeye. So we never find out what she did. Her name is not Mockingbird or Bobbi or anything like that, but it does kind of seem like that's supposed to be what apparently happened, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of a bummer because Mockingbird is a fun character. I think a West Coast Avengers team is something the MCU could really use right now, kind of lower stakes Avengers team, starting from scratch, almost like what a young Avengers team would be like if they just, took the young out of it and just maybe set them all in California, made this the West Coast team. Like a character like Mockingbird does bring a good energy to the team. It honestly feels like Kate Bishop to some extent is a fusion of Hawkeye and Mockingbird, which is why it's nice that she took up the West Coast Avengers mantle. But like in the MCU, there's technically an Agent 19, and there's a very good chance in this video I've said Agent 13 a couple times. They shouldn't, if it was Agent 22 and Agent 13, I would never have this problem, but like 13 and 19, whatever. The one that's Mockingbird, that like agent exists in the MCU, but also there's a actual character on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. who is just this character. And I don't remember if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ever made reference to the fact that she maybe dated Hawkeye or something like that, but it makes complete sense because she was a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the same time that Hawkeye was. Like, they totally could have bumped into each other. Mockingbird was also a big part of the Earth's Mightiest Hero show. She was one of the characters who was part of the Skrull infiltration. The Skrulls just got her and then swapped her out. So we meet her in, I believe, season 2 pretty early. And it turns out that she is one of the Skrulls. I think she's actually Skrull Queen. She's Ferengi. And she's working with the Skrull Captain America, which is cool. It's a nice, like, kind of nod to the comics. But I guess they didn't want to do Spider-Woman because it's too confusing. So that's kind of her deal. Super secret agent, scientist, doctor, very smart. Has a relationship with Hawkeye, was a member of the West Coast Avengers, died, came back to life because it turned out she was a Skrull, fights a ghost that is a cowboy from the old, like, Wild West days who keeps getting reincarnated, and Darren Cross's, I think, brother, who is a sharpshooter. That's more or less her deal. In Marvel Snap currently, and I'm making this video about 8 hours before the card releases, so probably won't change yet. I would not be surprised if this character becomes a 5'8", maybe, or I don't think they can make her a 6'9". They could maybe make her a 6'9". Either way, she's a 5 cost, 9 power with the card text. Costs 1 less for each card you have in play that did not start in your deck. So I think Ben Bro had made a good case for how this card works, what they were going for here. Because I don't think Mockingbird, originally, I kind of assumed from, just seeing all of these characters, like when I originally heard of Mockingbird, and then I had heard of Taskmaster and Echo, I was like, oh, she's one of those. She can, like, mock your fighting style. She can learn how to fight anybody. And she's a good fighter, but that's not her deal. She is just, like, a very good S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. So the way they thought about this is she synergizes well with the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. So if you have Maria Hill and Coulson and Fury and the Helicarrier, which isn't an agent unless it's the smiling Dan Hip Helicarrier, which is an alive guy, I would love to see. They should make a comic in the Dan Hip-verse where the Helicarrier's, like, part of it. But anyway, so like if you're playing Coulson, you get another card in your hand. If you play that card, now Mockingbird is a 4 cost, 9 power, which makes her really good because that is something that, like, happens very frequently. You play cards that do not come from your hand. There's plenty of locations that just give you cards either from your opponent's hand or just a random 3 cost card or something like that. So she's going to synergize well with those locations. And I think this will be a card where, like, if you play Coulson, you play Maria Hill, you play Nick Fury, you put 1, maybe 2 of those cards on the board pretty early. She's a 3 cost, 9 power. Like, that's incredible. She also synergizes very well with Loki because none of the Loki cards started in your deck, I think. I know Loki's tricky because the way they transform, but I think the way we understand it, that is still how she works. And that same token, she's gonna work really well with Thanos. I would say the one problem with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cards is the costs do kind of progress in a way that's pretty linear. So like you're playing a 3 cost card to get a 4 cost card, and then you play a 4 cost card. It's like with Thanos, you can play 5 1 cost Infinity Stones that technically did not start in your deck very easily, and then boom, you have a 0 cost 9 power Mockingbird. So I would not be surprised if there's a Mockingbird Moon Girl Thanos deck or something like that. So yeah, she synergizes very well with those characters. I would say she synergizes okay with Hawkeye, not exceptionally well. She synergizes pretty well with Captain America, with Dazzler, with a lot of these cards that got introduced this season, because there's a couple of characters who work well with a full board, right? That's what Elsa Bloodstone, that's what Angela, those characters, like, you want to get as many cards as you can on the board. And if you are playing 5 cards that are not in your hand, you have to play some cards usually to get those cards into your hand. So you're going to have a pretty full board once you're putting a Mockingbird down if she's a 2 or a 1 cost. And I did notice this recently. A lot of the fill up your space cards are redheaded women. So it's like Angela, Elsa Bloodstone, Hope Summers, Jean Grey, Rescue, all like Marvel redheaded women. It's not like all of them because there's obviously, Typhoid Mary has red hair, she doesn't work that way. But Mockingbird works well with that group because if you're going to play a low-cost Mockingbird, you're probably going to have some lanes that are filled up. So yeah, I think I like conceptually how all the shield cards work together. I think that's pretty clever. So I like that she is first and foremost a shield agent, and she is the ultimate like piece for this deck. I don't know if she's going to turn into something that's like a viable deck on its own, but I think she is going to be a great part of Thanos decks. And like maybe that will make the shield deck fun, because that is the fun thing about the shield deck. It's unpredictable, so it makes it hard to play that metagame against your opponent. And so you do all that stuff, and then you get a low cost 9 power. That's pretty good. So yeah, that is Mockingbird. I did not expect this to be as long as it was, but it was because I kept having to go and check to make sure I had her origin right, because it is kind of confusing because of the retcons. And the retcons, she's been retconned a lot. Like they did a bunch of retcons where she was Kazar's friend, and no, she actually helped with the Man-Thing project, and actually she was the shield agent the whole time. And then they were like, and that character was also a Skrull, so she didn't die. She seemed like she died, but now she's this character. So like, man, I mean, if you get a character that's like been around since the 70s, you're gonna run into this a lot, because you know, it builds on itself to the point where it does become somewhat inaccessible. I understand when people are like, comics are hard. I would say as a reading recommendation, Hawkeye and Mockingbird. It was written by Jim McCann with art by David Lopez and Alvaro Lopez, letters by Corey Petit, and colors by Nathan Fairbarn. It's 6 issues, so it's nice and quick, it's pretty self-contained, and at the end of issue 1, Hawkeye and Mockingbird, but mostly Mockingbird, because she is, I would say, the main character of this book, just go through her backstory and kind of explain what it's supposed to be. So like what I was reading you is kind of how it was written and like how she was introduced and then what they decided she was later. This gives you a very, very solid accounting of like, this is when she worked at S.H.I.E.L.D., this is when she met Clint, this is when they got married, this is West Coast Avengers, and this, Phantom Rider, all that stuff. I also really enjoyed the Mockingbird solo series from 2016. I don't hear people talk about this a lot, but it's like 8 issues, it's super fun, it's got a very strange presentation. I would say like the first 5 issues specifically are very interesting. I think it takes a couple of issues before you figure out what's going on. I'll just say it because I think it's helpful for understanding. According to the 5th issue, I think you can read the first at least 4 issues in whatever order you want, because they're all different days. So if you like read them in order like I did, you read it to 4 and then you go back to 1 and they're like, oh right, that's what she was talking about, that's why she has this thing. So it's a good introduction to her rogues gallery and her friends and all that. It's written by Chelsea Kane with art by Kate Niemczyk, colors by Rochelle Rosenberg, and letters by VC Joe Caramagna. Also 6 covers for that series by Joelle Jones, who did Lady Killers, and she made Yara Flor Wonder Girl. Like, I think she's got a really cool art style. I'd love to see a whole Mockingbird book drawn by Joelle. If you like this video, share it with your friends that play Marvel Snap, because everybody, I'm sure, is going to be like, who is this character who is kind of maybe Hawkeye's wife and also kind of maybe in that show that doesn't really count anymore, and throw it onto the message boards, subreddits, all that stuff, so more people can find it. I have more videos on this channel. I have another channel called Nando V Movies and a podcast called Mostly Nitpicking. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you guys next time.